Start recording. Here we go. So optical compensation is pretty important. So this is a concept that you should be mindful of because this is the cornerstone, if not, I mean, this is like the cornerstone that will make or break your typefaces. And no matter if it's experimental or formal or conservative, this is going to be what is very, very important. So optical compensation means that you are compensating for what is around your letter form. So if you see here that these two lines in a V shape, within those shapes are the same length, but because of everything that's surrounding it, it looks like it's a different length. Same for the lines that are surrounded by the arrow-like shapes over there. So they are the same length, but because of everything surrounding it, they're giving the illusion that it is smaller or longer. And this is what you want to combat. This is going to be your friend and enemy in type design. So here we have the cornerstone blocks, which is the uppercase O, uppercase H, lowercase n, and lowercase o. These two letters are what you usually design first in a typeface because they will establish the rhythm of your typeface. The H is the most straightest rectangular letter that you will have, and the O is the roundest letter that you will have. If you can think of an uppercase D, for example, that is a combination of this rectangle and a round, right? And the P is a little bit more complicated, but it's the same kind of concept. So you want to create these basic building shapes for your typeface first. And for the lowercase, it's a lowercase n because that is the most rectangular shape of letter that you will have. So here we go. I've done a little bit of outline. And so overshoots are, you've heard me say overshoots quite a lot. So overshoots mean the compensation that you are giving round letters to make them look the same size as your rectangular letters. So here, if you see, without optical compensation, if I was making them mathematically the same length or height, they would look sort of out of whack. So if you see here on the lower half, you can see the circle looks smaller than that rectangle because it doesn't have enough surface area as much as I guess square in this case does. And same for that triangle shape. And if you can think of that triangle shape, that's like what a V looks like, that's what an A looks like. And here you can see with optical compensation that that little tip is extending just a tiny little bit to show that it is optically the same size. That circle you can see is slightly bigger than the X height and the baseline. So this is what you need to keep in mind when you're designing letter forms. So if you see here, this goes for everything. This goes for everything in type. So if you see here that jot or tittle or whatever you call the top I of a I dot. Terminology is also overrated, I think, but it's important to know enough that you know what I'm talking about instead of like that like thingamajiggy or whatever. So if you see here, the dot of that I is bigger than, the width of that is wider than the width of that smaller stem, because if it was the same width, it would look smaller. And if you see here, diagonals are also compensated. So if you see, I've highlighted the I, the V, and the X because they're all different angles, and if you can see, they're compensating. So the longer a line gets, the more optically heavier it looks. So you're making them actually a teeny tiny bit skinnier because they're getting longer to compensate for that. Like if you took the I stem, rotated it, and just like made the corners different, it would look a lot darker. And this is what you're doing as a compensation. And these are just general rules, right? Like if you have a particular special design, like yours might be a little bit different. And so the applications to letter form examples here. So these are the common problems that I see with someone that doesn't know much about the optical compensation logics in Illustrator, let's say. If you get the same block and if you just cut them off here, so if you see I have 4 Lego blocks almost, they have like 3 of the same Lego pieces, 1 of the same Lego piece, and then if I put them together, you think you have an E, but you actually don't. Because here, so like here, I'm just gonna go back and forth. Optically compensated E, not optically compensated E. Back, forth. So this looks a lot more balanced in our eyes, because each bar of the E has been set differently. So here, if you see, there are actually 4 distinct shapes, and this is a sans, so this is a lot more simpler than what it would be with a serif, for example. But in order for these bars to look geometric, you'll notice that the middle bar is actually the shortest bar because it's surrounded by so much stuff. It's the narrowest and it's the shortest, so it looks like it fits in that shape. And the bottom, so like the pink block that you see there is the longest because it's on the bottom, so our eyes think a shape looks more balanced if it's slightly wider on the bottom. So if you notice like like a lowercase x, for example, it's actually slightly wider at the bottom. It's almost like a shape where it's what's that shape I'm talking about? Any geometry people in here? It's yes, the trapezoid. Yes, it's actually a very, very slight trapezoid. Yeah, so if you see here, this is a common problem. But the F is not E sans lower bar. The F bar is slightly lower and the width is narrower than the E because there is not much going on that bottom. So you are condensing that shape. Because if you see the F that's just literally an E with the bottom bar chopped off, it looks like it looks like too much is on the top and it doesn't look balanced because there's so much negative space on that bottom bit. And so if you have the E, F, and L, so needless to say, the L is not the E with the bottom 2 bars cut off. The L is slightly narrower than even the F, actually, because there's not much surrounding it, so it looks like it's longer already. So you want to cut that a little bit more. And also because there's not much surrounding it, that bar might be slightly tall, that bar might be slightly more thicker than the E. And these are just general rules. According to what your design looks like, this might not apply. So that is like, there is no like, there's no rule that is true for every single instance. Like that will not happen. But these are just the more common problems that I see. Yeah, so here, these differences are more obvious in high contrast serif constructions. But then you also have like the separate issues such as the middle serif you'll see is the tallest out of all the serifs because it has a bottom bit and a top bit, unlike you know, like the top and the bottom. Like it has serifs that are going both north and south, so to speak. And your job is to fill in more space because the bars are thin, right? So that negative space is a little bit more. So your struggles will be a little bit different according to what you're designing. And so here's the V and the A. The V is not just the A with the bar cut off, needless to say. Here you can see that the lines are not parallel. Because the join is happening at the very bottom of the V, you'll notice that that join is slightly more crunched for the one that's touching the baseline. And to account for the complex joins at the apex of the diagonals, yeah, so you'll see here that A is probably slightly wider than the V to account for that middle bar as well. Yeah, here's a trapezoid. It's slightly different. And this goes for everything. So here you see the X, which is at first glance seemingly just a bar, like 2 bars interlocked, but it's actually not. Oh, here's a trapezoid thing again, and also it's not a continuous line. If it was a continuous line, it wouldn't look balanced because of the optical compensation or optical illusion, as I would like to call it. So if you see on ampersands, often it looks like it's one continuous line, but if you try to make it like that, it would look awkward. So a lot of these complex joins are broken up. So you can see that they're slightly staggered. Any questions so far?
Just generally, like when you start any sort of like, how do you keep in mind it? Is there a rule? Like how do you realize the pattern?
Oh, I mean, these apply to all of them. Like these are like broad concepts. So like when I'm starting out, like I definitely know that like the X should be a trapezoid shape. Does that answer your question? I feel like that was a roundabout way of.
That's a good example.
Yeah, yeah. So like, so I mean, there's more nuances, but like I think these apply to most designs, unless you're making something complete, like so unconventional that the conventions don't help you. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so so here we go. Optical compensation amounts may vary per style. So maybe this answers your question more, where the optical compensation, like the more exaggerated your letters get, the more exaggerated your compensation gets. So on a bolder X, that staggering is no longer like subtle, right? Like in a regular shape, it might almost be connected, but when it gets like so elongated, that compensation is very, very obvious. Okay, so those are the adjustments. That's it for that lecture over there. And then I think I mentioned that I was going to go back to, oh, where am I going? To this letter form digitization slide. So I'll just quickly go back. Yeah, so best practices, we went over this last class. So on curve points, yeah, so again, plot points at extrema, top, bottom, left, and right first. So when you're drawing it, plot those points first. If not, use the red arrow plugin to double check that you do have them at the extreme. I think I was talking to someone earlier about like the types of red arrow errors. The inflection points I wouldn't worry too much about at this point. I'll explain more about them later. I think what I do want you to focus on is the extreme point errors. So like those do take care. And then yeah, so if it goes for interior extrema, sticking to vertical or horizontal handles. But for the, I guess, yeah, I'll restate that this is for the extreme points. And for anything on the inside, like the spine of this S, that will probably not be 90 degrees. Yes?
When it gives you the extreme arrow, is that because there's not an extreme point, or it's because that point in itself isn't?
It's because it just doesn't exist. It doesn't really know like which point should be the extreme. So you might have put it there, but for some reason it got messed up and is no longer the extreme point. Then it'll just give you an error. It doesn't really know if it's like just not there or if it's just not working. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so yes, use handle proportionately. Don't cross them, use extraneous points or make them lopsided. Use overlaps, different kinds of overlaps. So these are like, so the left side is using that, I call it a pizza triangle, that pizza triangle overlap. The right side is just literally using two shapes. Yeah. All right, so examples I won't go over right now because we're going to go into the glyph window. All right. So tips for efficiency, better way to copy paste, aligning X heights, better proportions. Let me just double check the recording is running. Yes. Okay. So I think that there were a lot of questions about how do I know that, let's say like my C looks like my O, which is a very valid concern because a C should look like your O. So here, here you can add components. Components is like cloning a version of your letter into another glyph. It's kind of like making like an alias, if you're familiar with that term. So let's say like I'm making a C and an O, and I want to make sure my C looks like the left side of my O, and I don't want to just like sit there and copy paste every single time. When I'm drawing the C, I would do Command-Shift-C, and it creates this thing called the component. So Command-Shift-C, otherwise, you can go in here, you can do, where's Command-Shift-C? Yeah, see if you go in glyphs, you can do add component, which means it will bring up this window, and you can add in different shapes. So here I'm gonna add an O, and it will give you like a shadow clone of my O. So this is my O, and let's say I make it like, I decide to make this wide for some reason. I'm just gonna make this wide. Oh, do you see how it changed? Like the shadow O changed, right? This is useful for gauging, like, okay, like, is my height correct? Is my ratio correct? Like, I'll align it with the C and see if it aligns, right? So this is the shadow version of my O. This is more useful when it comes to, let's say, like, creating all these accents. So an O acute is an O with an accent on top. So here I would definitely go like Command-Shift-C or add component, and then I would draw my, I mean, this is going to be a pretty crappy acute, but like, I would draw an acute like that, right? And then, like, so if I wanted to make changes to my O, the acute would also have that. But this is just a way to, so that's the proper way of using a component, but this is also like a good tool for you to have as well. And then, so there we go. Guides are important. So guides, if you right click, you can add a guide. Well, I have a lot of guides. But anyway, so I just added this guide here. Also, like, you have to make sure it shows. So like, just like Illustrator, you can add guides, but you just have to make sure you can see them. So if you go in View, Show Guides, just make sure that's on. And then if you right click, add a guide, then you get this like blue line with a node. This node is there for you to drag, and blue means it's a local guide. So if I go in the O, it's gone. Yeah, so this is useful. And then also this is, you can move the angle around. So here, so if you have to have this selected. So if you have this selected, you have the guide selected. And then if you click on this line, you can move it around, right? So if you have like an italic, this is a good way to change it. And also, I believe you can shift it. So let me do this. Oh no, the shift doesn't work. Anyway, so if you want to move it in certain increments, you can select it, and then you can, this is the rotation tool here. You can rotate it, so I'm going to rotate it by 10 degrees. So this is now rotating by 10 degrees. And then you can command, so if you like have this set, and if you want 2 of them, you can also select it, Command-C, Command-V. It looks like nothing changed, but it's actually just there. You can drag it, and so you can have as many as you want. And let's say you want to have this to be global. So you right click on it, make global guide, and then it turns red. Am I going too fast? Is that okay? Okay, just like flag me if I'm going too fast. So this is a global guide, which means it'll now show up everywhere else. The downside of this is that it moves with every single editing window. So if you want to lock it, right click, lock guide, and then now it'll lock it, and then you can't select it anymore. So that'll prevent you from shifting it accidentally. Yeah, so and then you can also delete it. Just select, delete, select, delete. Yeah. So those are guides. We covered components, and also, okay, so correcting path direction. I think there were some questions about sometimes like a shape is added or sometimes a shape is getting cut out and you don't really know why. So I'm gonna create a new, I have no plus, I'm gonna use this as an example. So I'm gonna just make 2 quick shapes. So right now the shape is getting added. How does the glyphs program know that this should be a plus sign as opposed to, you know, something that looks like this? Like, I think this is a problem that someone was having, right? I think a couple of you had problems where the overlaps were just like looking like this. So if you see every shape in glyphs has this arrow, like, okay, has this arrow. And this is showing which direction your shape is going. So if it's going in the same direction, I mean, it only has 2 directions, right? It can go clockwise or it can go counterclockwise. If it's going in the same direction, it thinks you should add it. If it's going in the opposite direction, it should be subtracted. So here, if I select, you have to select the actual node that has the triangle. This is called the first node. So it all goes back to that, like, me trying to explain Unicodes and computers to you all. So these coordinates have first, second, third, and so forth. They have a direction and they have a point from where they start. So this is where it's starting. So you can do reverse selected contours, and then now it's adding again. If I do reverse selected contours again, it is now subtracting. This is because this shape is going counterclockwise and this shape is going clockwise. So you do need to reverse or do something you want in order for this to do. Oh, sorry, that doesn't sound like anything. Basically, you just need to make sure that if that's happening to you, then you probably need to reverse something. You can do that manually, or you can go to Paths, Correct Path Direction, Command-Shift-R. This is very, 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 very useful. If you have an obvious shape, like here, like why would you have that in there unless you wanted it to be reversed, right? Like there's no reason for you to add that in there if you didn't want it to be cut out, because why else, like what's the point? So if you do correct, wasn't it? Yeah, correct path direction, Command-Shift-R, it will correct it. Yeah, so Command-Shift-R is always good to know. Command-Shift-R. Yeah. There are some edge cases though, like if you have like an unusual looking shape, it might not really work. So just like make sure that it works for you, and you just like double check before going forward. Okay, correcting path direction. We got through that. About layers and alt designs. Okay, so we were talking about alt designs. How do you keep track of different versions of the letters that you're creating? And so there's, so I think I was telling you about the concept of, I mean, it's a crappy looking plus, but bear with me. The concept of a background layer. Every glyph design in here has two layers. It has the active layer and it has the background layer as a default. So if you do Command B or Paths Edit Background, you're getting taken into that background layer, and you can see this because of this like peachy color that comes out. And so everything that you're drawing in here, I'm going to draw a circle, so it's obviously different. Circle is in the background layer, and you can see it is active when you're in there. But but if you do Command B, it goes back to the original. It goes back to the original shape. And you can see a faint outline of the background layer. So if you want, so how to utilize this is that, let's say like I have this plus design that I want to see adjust a little bit and see how it works. I would do Command J. Command J, let's see, is selection to background. It copies the first layer that you're seeing into the background layer. So I would Command J, make sure that's in the background, and then I would futz around with this because I've saved a version of my background. And then if I want to change it, like I can swap the foreground to the background. Command Shift, oh, what is, yeah, Command Shift J, isn't it? Swap, yeah, so swap with background, here we go. So if you can swap with the background that way. So if you do plus, oh, control? Oh my god. Brain fart moment. Okay. Is that a control? That's control. Control Command J. Oh, there we go. Control Command J. So you can swap out two different layers this way. This is the way that I usually work. If you're the kind of person that like really needs a ton of layers, like you really want like more layers, there's this thing called layers on the side, and I have this can get confusing, so I really don't recommend it. Sorry, I'm just gonna open up a different window. Just gonna delete. Okay, yeah. So you probably won't have that many layers as I do, because I just have a lot of different master layers up here. But if your file looks somewhat like this, and you want different layers, yeah, if you want different layers, then you go copy, and see how it copies here with a different timestamp. So you can have like different versions. So I'm just gonna, yeah. So I have what I had before versus this February 6, 2020 version. So you can also make layers that way if you wanna work like that. But I do recommend just using 2 layers if possible. And let's say you did really want to save multiple pluses, so people could have 10 different kinds of pluses in their font file. Then you could do glyph. Okay, so you would have the glyph in question selected, glyph duplicate glyph, and then you see now you've created a plus 0.001. So you'll notice here, let me just go here. So the plus has a Unicode value. So the plus will happen if you type a plus. The plus 001 has no Unicode value because it's an alternative glyph. It will not be typed, but you can access it if you have like special software like InDesign that you can access OpenType features with. And so for here you can have multiple different plus designs, and then just keep on going that way. So yeah, so there's so as a recap, you can create you can duplicate the glyphs and create you know, plus 0.001, 002, 003. So create that way versus having it in two layers versus having it in extra layers in here. Yes. Sorry, could you repeat that? Yes, so that's possible. So you see, like, because I added a point ++1, there's different suffixes you can add. So if you do like +.alt, glyphs automatically knows that you want that to be an alternate sometimes. So if you go in features, maybe if I update, it'll show up. Maybe it won't. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, we can do this also. So like, there's different ways you can put it in contextual alternates. You can put it in stylistic. Like, there's like different kinds of categories that you can bunch them into according to what you want it to be. But for instance, like if you see in this window, if I did substitute, see how here I have substitute ampersand by ampersand point SS01 as a stylistic alternate. That can happen. So like if you all you would do is write in here like sub plus by what is this named, plus dot alt, and then so like if you update here, let's see, let's go and see here. So if I go, make sure that, so if I have plus and see features over here, let's see if I do stylistic set 1, no, stylistic oh yeah, here we go. So stylistic alternates. So when I enable stylistic alternates, I now have that plus, and when I turn it off, I have the original plus again. Yeah. So that's an alt. And then yes, so hinting. So there's a question about hinting. So hinting is unfortunately a process that is left for the very end, because how hinting works is that, do you see this zone right here? These little tan zones. So these are the zones that are used for hinting. So if you see an O, for instance, you'll notice that there are overshoots. Remember we were talking about overshoots earlier? So the edge of an N is not the same as the edge of an O. So here I have this zone set. So it's set to catch the lowest and the highest, perhaps. And maybe in something, yeah, so here like in A, I have that sharp point as an overshoot. So it catches all those zones. But for you to for you to set these zones, you have to know what is the tallest letter and what is, basically to know what that zone is. So unfortunately, you can't really go to here. So alignment zone is what you have to pay attention to get the kerning that you want. So see, like I'm saying, like, okay, like the size that I want to align as that hinting zone, like that like tan zone is 16 units. And that, don't worry about it too much. We'll go over it probably towards the end of the semester. What happens usually, if you do Command E, there's auto hint. So auto hint will probably be good for anything that you'll be using in most modern software. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So auto hint will probably be good. Manual hinting is a separate job altogether, believe it or not. There's people that just hint full time. Like they're called hinters. Yeah, it's like a very specific type of software engineering. So it might go to like a scope of a very special class somewhere where you only learn how to hint. But we'll go over like what the idea of hinting is. Okay, and tips for kerning. So kerning we will go over at some point, but see how, so I have some kerning groups set. So see here, the left side, see there's kerning groups. So this is assigned to the kerning group of O because an O shape looks almost like the C. So when I kern the O with an A per se, I want it to be automatically applied to the C when it gets attached to an A next to it. So these, after you're done with all the basic designs, you'll assign kerning groups to all your letters, and then from there you'll start to kern. Yeah. So that being said, you can't get to kerning, but if you have really, really, really good spacing, and you should, it will limit the amount of kerning pairs that you have to do. It's really, really, really important because kerning takes forever. Even in like, so normally when I tell people how, well, not tell people, normally when I ask people like, how long do you kern for? I think like a friend that works at Hoffler told me like it takes 2 weeks for them to kern one style. So like 8 hours a day, 5 hours a week, 2 weeks. So kerning takes a very, very, very long time. And that's on the other spectrum, right? Like I've heard like, well, not heard, usually like I think I would quote like 1 full day for 1 weight of like a basic Latin set, meaning like, you know, A through Z and no like A through Z Latin set, probably something like 250 glyphs. Like I think it would take me 8 hours or so. But you don't want to do this 8-hour work over and over and over again every time a design changes. So you save that at the very, very, very end. When you're done with the whole thing, you just want it out in the world, then you start kerning. And we'll go over it slightly, but that'll be at the end of the semester. Okay, so that brings us to how do you know you have good spacing? How do we judge this? Fortunately, there's a good resource, not resource, a codified way of doing this. I'm gonna go and why do I have shortcuts if I don't use them? Okay, homework templates, week 3. Okay, so I'm giving you a PDF in case there's like some like someone out there that doesn't want to use the Adobe suite, which I completely respect, but you will have to figure out how to make your proof without my help. So but if you're that person, please go ahead. I mean, I've had students where they've made their own proofing document in HTML, CSS, all that stuff. Looks great. Respect. But I use InDesign as a person of very moderate programming talent. So I'm going to give you this template. It is all linked here as a Dropbox link in that course outline that you are probably all very familiar with. So if you see here, I've given you a document where there are the letters that you should have. Right now it's set to Georgia or something, but it should be swapped out with your font. And then there's this thing called biggest, target, and smallest. Your letters should have a target size, meaning that you should have a size that you are aiming it to be like the Goldilocks version. Because it's completely irrational to think that your typeface can work at 4 points and work at 100 points. Like, it doesn't really work that way. It's like having like shoes for like that's ultra light but also like ultra like protection. Like, it doesn't really, like, sometimes it doesn't really work. Anyway, so okay, so this is just a template for you to start with. I've given you a target size as an arbitrary 24 points, but this should be changed to the target that you want your typeface to be, which at this point is still the Carolingian that you've started with. So pick a target size, and then this is like the Goldilocks range where it's, I mean, like, think about it. Like, 24 is arbitrary, but a range that is like, I want it to work between 20 points and 30 points is not so arbitrary, because it's supposed to have this range. At some point it won't work because it's too small. At some point it won't work because it's too big, but there should be a comfortable range. So pick a target and pick the biggest that you think it would work at, and pick the smallest that you think it would work at. And this is a letter size document, so as you're working, it would really, really, really help if you can print this out and periodically check, because 20 points on your screen is arbitrary, right? Like, is this 20 points? Is this really 20 points? Like, when you see like, zoom 100%, like, is that really 100%? It's not. And heads up, if you export this PDF, look at it in Preview, look at it in Acrobat, look at it on a web browser, it will always look different, because each software has their own way of rendering a font file. If you look at it at a certain app, it will look different. If you look at it on a Windows computer, it will look different, because the macOS rendering system is different from a Windows. So I highly suggest that you print this out and look at it when you're getting to the final stages. And then, of course, look, I have words for you. All these different words that you can spell with designator. So, yeah, so here we have all of this. And guess what? You're going to have to design the space. Spaces are designed. Haha. You also don't have a T, so you're going to have to make the T. Yeah. So you're going to have to make the T, and you're going to have to make the space. Yeah, like this space, like this space. You have to design this space. I know it's just a space that has nothing in it, but it's very important. So what I would recommend is that, so spacing strings, remember how I was saying you have to judge your letters between N's and O's? This is how you're going to judge it. When you're at a certain point where like your O looks somewhat like an O, so you're going to copy this in. I know it doesn't look like much when it's like N's and O's, it's just a string. Yeah. So here you're just gonna type it in the editing window like this. Judge everything so the spacing looks right between N's and O's. And at a starting point, when you should design, you should make sure your N's and O spacing is pretty good. Just type out a bunch of N's and O's, and typically your O's will be symmetrical on the left and right side. So see space. This is left side bearing, right side bearing. Start out with them being the same. And then after you get your O, you can judge the N. And because it has a shoulder, I mean, this is a serif, so it's a little bit different. But the space should be slightly different on the left and right side of your N. And because you're all doing Carolingian, you should have serifs, so that'll be pretty fun, right? We'll see we'll see how spacing works in there. So yeah, so just make sure that that is set, export it, export that PDF, and put it on your document page. Great. Thank you. If you have any questions, let me know.